Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And welcome back to everybody who joined the previous webinar of this series. I can see a few familiar names popping up. We're going to be talking about embedding AI in internal audit, but let's start with some introductions. Jamie, if you want to go first.
Hi, I'm Jamie Crossman-Smith. Nice to meet you all. For those of you that I haven't met before, I'm founder and principal at a boutique firm called Bloch AI. I don't have to make any apologies on this call because I am a career internal auditor, having worked with Deloitte, Lloyds Banking Group, Co-op, and most recently 7 years at Grant Thornton as Managing Director of Digital and Data and Technology. I help clients with managed service AI problems and create bespoke apps to help them use AI in the workplace. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm Charlotte Kendal Parker. I'm a senior manager at DCR Partners. So at DCR, we help organizations manage risk and achieve business goals using our expertise across business change, technology, cyber, and data. Much like Jamie, I'm also a career internal auditor, and I've spent my time working across the UK and Australia. A few points of note. So today's webinar will run for about an hour, for exactly an hour, including time at the end for questions. You can submit your questions at any time through the Teams Q&A function during the webinar. And we've got about 50 minutes or so at the end where we'll come to them. After the webinar, we'll also send out a feedback survey. And once you complete that, you'll be able to get access to the slides and to today's video recording as well. Jamie, do you want to talk through our series?
Yeah, so for those of you that joined us on the first one, I think you know where we're going with this, but this is a 3-part webinar series. We're on part 2 this time. Part 1, we explored how AI is transforming internal audit, unlocking opportunities to increase efficiency. And I think my view working with a number of internal audit functions is everybody sees the value in AI, but is still a little bit nervous about the accuracy and the controls that sit around it. And last time, we tried to make it easy for you by giving you a live demonstration of how you can build AI agents yourself using Copilot. Today, we'll start to go beyond that and start to equip internal auditors with the knowledge and skills to be able to experiment and embed AI through practical, scalable, audit-ready workflows. And so we're going to actually show you some of them today. And we'll give you a live demonstration of how we've built an AI report writing agent. And part 3, we'll focus on how you actually audit AI, because coming up in March, one of the main challenges a lot of firms have is you're trying to work out how you're going to use AI, but so is your business. And you're trying to work out where the governance of this sits, whether it sits in existing governance frameworks or whether you have to carve out something new. And a lot of financial services organizations are suffering with this right now. So we'll talk you through in the next session how we've helped organizations do that and what the main challenges in this area are. Charlotte.
Thanks. So as Jamie mentioned, today we're focusing on embedding AI. And when we talk about embedding AI, we want to create scalable operational AI capabilities. And we're going to use report writing as our worked example today. We'll develop a solution from our business case. We'll map out process logic. We'll show you a live demo of the development process. And then we'll take you through the steps to embedding before we have our Q&A at the end. In the previous webinar, we introduced AI maturity levels for internal audit. The focus then was on early exploration and experimentation with AI. And so today we're moving on to embedding into our core internal audit processes. We consistently see 2 priority use cases for AI that internal audit teams are focused on at the minute. The first is report writing. So we all spend a significant amount of time drafting and refining reports, and it can be a common bottleneck in the audit review process. So the question is, what can AI do? We can use AI to write high quality draft reports much more quickly using a consistent writing style, so that regardless of who the individual authors are and what their different writing preferences are, internal audit has that one consistent voice to the organisation. The second major use case is quality assurance. So internal audit's a quality-driven function, and we see a lot of the time that the quality issues are not so much in the work performed as they are in the documentation. Teams spend a considerable amount of time performing manual QA checks and rectifying work papers, and AI can support with that process. We can do real-time quality controls during field work, and we can automate quality and completeness checks for work papers as well. And in both of these use cases, by reducing the manual effort that we spend in QA and in report writing, we free up time so that auditors can focus on really supporting the business and adding value where it makes a big impact. For today's webinar, as Jamie mentioned, or as we mentioned before, we're using the single practical use case of supporting internal audit report writing. So we're following the same process you saw in our previous webinar. We've already touched for report writing on some of those key business case drivers. So we want to reduce time spent drafting audit reports. We want to improve consistency and quality of reporting. We want to alleviate the review bottleneck. And ultimately, the objective is to move more quickly through the audit closeout process so that we can agree actions sooner, enable issues to be fixed earlier, and ultimately reduce risk to the business more effectively. And so if we follow this process way of thinking, the next step is to really understand what are our inputs. So what's the information, if we're thinking about an AI model, what's the information the AI will work from? Validations, how are we going to ensure accuracy, quality, and appropriateness? And outputs, what is that good AI-generated audit report that we want to aim for? What does that look like? What does that sound like? So let's start by mapping out the process. Jamie, you're on mute.
Schoolboy error. There we go. Right, mapping out the logic and requirements for AI tools. So as an experienced internal auditor as well as data analyst, there is the audit methodology and there's the things that you try to do to get around it. And I don't know whether it's inherent in me as an auditor just to do as I say, not as I do. But I think that's been the story of my career. But this is a process that most of you will probably follow, regardless of whether it's in your methodology or not, to create an audit report. And some of these things you kind of try to jump around, but most methodologies would much prefer you to do it in this sequential order, but we all know that's not quite right, but never mind. So where do you start if you're writing out an internal audit report? And the reason I'm saying this is writing out the internal audit report manually is the same as doing it with AI. So we're going to get there and help you understand that. So you'd start with the issues log. And the issues log, should be validated. You should have a good understanding of the root cause of those issues, and you should have an indicative idea of the risk and ratings, right? Now, if I'm an internal auditor creating this report, what I'd think, right, well, I can't put all these issues in an issue log into a report, so I need to start theming them up and chunking them up. So I'd theme them into findings, and it could be by root cause, it could be by what the management care, it could be by whatever those themes are, right? But you'd use your professional judgment to do that. And that would allow you to give the detail and the context around what you found and give you an overall rating, okay? The next step is actions. So I've got those high-level findings. Then I want to sit and work out, actually, so what are management going to do about it? So now I know a little bit more about the themes, and I've got the original issue log. I can start to piece together what management have to do to fix all of this, put some dates on it, etc. And once I've got that, so I've got the thematic findings, I've got the management actions, I can take that as a whole, and then I can create the executive summary, right? And then I piece all of that together in an internal audit report. As I didn't quite eloquently say before, I think that's what you probably should do, and that's what most of your methodologies will do. Some of you, like me, will sometimes think, well, I can just write a report, I can write the executive summary to start with. But let's be honest, if you're facing an EQA, or if you, if you're if you're having some sort of internal review, that's probably not the best way to do it. Now, let's say that this is your process. This is the one that you want to follow, and this is in your methodology, right? Why can't you get AI to do that? Well, you can. And remember, in our first webinar, we said that we need to treat AI as an individual and need to treat it like a person. And so the way we develop AI software today is we look at the manual process, we replicate those in prompts. Once we've replicated the prompts, we put them together, we chain them together to create the final output. So I can write a prompt to theme up the issue log. I can write a prompt to work out what those findings should be. I can write a prompt to work out what those actions that come out of those individual findings should be. And then I can write a prompt to create the executive summary. And then I can write a prompt to put it all together, PDF it, and put it in a nice little bow and create an internal audit report, right? Now, your mental IP, your experience, has to go into those prompts. And if we can just move on to the next slide, if that's all right, Charlotte. This is where the 3 C's we mentioned last time become really important. You've got to map out that mental IP that you have that creates a killer audit report. So context, clarity, and constraints. And to give you a brief refresher, and let's start with clarity. Clarity are essentially the requirements. You're giving a very set of clear instructions to the AI, what you want it to do, okay? I want you to theme these reports. I want you to theme these issues by blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? You're giving it really that clarity, but you're not going to be able to give it everything. So you're going to have to give it a frame of reference to fill in those gaps if you can't give it all the requirements. So then you give it the context. You are a senior internal auditor. You have 20 years experience. You are creating an internal audit report. The CEO doesn't really like internal audit. The CFO loves internal audit. Whatever the context may be, make sure it's all in there, because the AI uses that to fill in the gaps of what you've expressly told it. And then finally, constraints. If you don't tell it how you want the output and constrain it, you're probably not going to get what you want. I want a really short executive summary, no more than 100 words. Tell it. Do not make anything up. Tell it that. Do not go to sources that I haven't given you. Tell it that. And therefore, if you piece all of that together in a good prompt, and you apply those, you create those prompts at each step of that process with your mental IP, you're gonna be in a really good position to create a really good audit report. Charlotte.
Completely agree with everything that you said there, Jamie. I find it really helpful to kind of that frame of mind of explain something to AI the same way you'd explain it to a junior person on your team. So that kind of stepped out all the things that may be really obvious to you, but that you're not maybe kind of like don't come to your mind at first. And so I think that's kind of why mapping out that process and challenging yourself, what are all the things that we need to know, so that we can be really explicit and describe exactly the output that we're looking for as well. And it probably sounds really obvious, but to anyone who isn't doing it, it really is a game changer in terms of the quality of the output that you're getting. And so to kind of illustrate the point and of what we mean around, a good prompt versus a poor prompt, we've got these 2 examples on screen at the moment. They're trying to achieve the same outcome. It's really clear that the strong example on the right would produce a much higher quality than the prompt on the left. And so, if we kind of want to think about this, take a step back, a basic prompt is really describing the task. So you're asking AI to write audit findings based on your issues log, for example. Where a strong prompt goes further is it explains the process, it explains the standards and the controls that are expected to be followed. So we're being explicit about things like, how should we group our issues into our findings? Should we group them by root cause or by control theme? Different internal audit functions have slightly different report writing styles. And so all of that is the kind of stuff that you want to be really, really explicit about. We want to be really clear about the source material that's being used. For example, we're restricting the AI to only using the issues log, and we might include constraints saying use every issue in the log, don't create or remove any issues, and don't duplicate issues across findings. Structure is another really important element. So, you know, how long do you want your finding to be? How do you want it to be set out? Do you want to, how much background and context do you want in there? What do you want your risk and impact statement at the end to look like? And the other things like specifying your risk rating framework. So all of this information matters, because without it, AI is going to have to make assumptions about your methodology and your reporting standards. In most cases, these assumptions aren't going to align exactly how you want them to with how your function operates and how you report. So if you can tell it all of this, you're avoiding kind of rework down the line, and you're getting to that high quality draft much, much sooner. And I suppose the final point here is, if you're building a more advanced AI solution, such as an engineered system, you can draw on additional sources of information. So you could provide some of your previous internal audit reports, some good examples to work from, or your risk universe, so that you're kind of further improving the quality and the consistency of the output, and you're setting those standards that you want to work towards. Jamie, anything you want to add here before we go on to the demo?
No, I just think what you've put is really good here. So, and we said this last time round. So, those weak examples, Charlotte, they're perfect. I see too many audit functions do this. They write one line to an AI and they expect a great answer, and it's just not gonna. That's not gonna work. Now you've crafted a really good prompt here in the strong examples, because you've added those 4 bullet points in the middle, or chain of thought, where you've actually dictated to the AI how you want it to solve the problem in the order. And the other thing that really makes a difference on the prompt is to use, as we said in the last week, was something called a technique called future prompting, which is actually giving it some examples. So you can take this strong example and say, hey, here's 2 really good audit reports as well, where you should copy the style and format and whatever it could be out from here, and take learnings from it, and it will do it. Now I've got to the past where you'll hear I've been asked to fine-tune models for audit reporting purposes and for finance reporting purposes, and it takes you that extra mile. But honestly, 80% of what you need to get a really good first draft report, all you need to do is follow the examples that we've told you today. Context, clarity, constraints. Use that chain of thought idea. So actually give it those bullets to tell it how to solve the problem, because AI loves to do what it's told most of the time. And also give it some examples. And that is just like a person, isn't it? If you've got that young graduate coming in who's really clever, who can do stuff, but really needs a clear set of instructions to do it, this is how you lay it out, and AI is no different.
Brilliant. Should we do the demo?
Should we? Okay. Let's do the demo. Let me share my screen. So, set the story. About a year back. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. About a year back, I was asked by a mid-sized financial services firm to help them speed up the way they store working papers, the way they administer their reports, and the way they create internal audit reporting. And that was simply because, do you know what, the tools out there are really expensive. And if you're a small firm, spending 30, 40, 50 grand for a handful of auditors on a big ticket tool is just feels unnecessary when you're already doing half the job in Excel and SharePoint. So that's where this project started, and since finishing that, I've built it out a little bit more. So what I'm going to show you today is the way big financial services organizations are crafting internal audit, building tools that do internal audit report generation. I'm going to explain how they work and show you that it's nothing more than the prompts, those prompting skills that are behind it with a big shiny front end to make it work. Okay, so this is a dashboard and you're an auditor, and you know this is probably going to be the way forward for most of you in 5 years time when you move to one of the big tools, or these tools like this become really commonplace. So I've just done an internal audit review of AI governance. I have, but this is all nice and dummy. So I want to upload the terms. I want to upload the issue log. As we said before, we're going to start with the issue log. So let's find the issue log. I always get AI and IA the wrong way around. Let's create that project. So it wants me now to upload an issue log. So let's upload an issue log. Here's my AI governance audit issue log. Right. So it's probably easier than to show you on the screen. Why don't I show you what it actually looks like in real life? So here's, and this probably all looks quite familiar to you. So here's, you know, here's a set of issues that I found. Here's what I've found. Here's my initial thought of a risk rating. Here's my initial thoughts of a root cause, and here's how it links back to my RACM. Here's the control reference. So I can see these are pretty good. And they're all demo because you can see they're perfect and they're not real world at all. But they give you an idea. So it's got a nice 14 set. It's got a nice 14 issues there from an issue log to have a play with. So let's go back to the app, and it's brought in all 14 issues. Okay, and if I wanted to edit them, I can do. So I can go to edit here. Incomes from the bar from the side, and I can change those ratings, etc. Whatever I want to do. Right now. So you're happy with that issue log. If the manual process was, you'd be with Excel, you'd be great. I need to start theming them, and that's where the first prompt from AI comes in. So I'm going to give AI a prompt to be able to theme these together. So let's consolidate them. So there's all my actions. There's all my observations. Sorry. Let's just make this easy. And let's just say I want 5. All right, let's see how we go. Let's generate some findings. Now, in the meantime, what is this doing in the background? Well, it's theming those together as we've discussed by those criteria, but it's doing nothing more than executing in the background a series of prompts with the data that I've given it. So this is a little bit more technical than a prompt that you'd put into ChatGPT or whatever else, but it's just the same. So here's my consolidation prompt. First of all, here's a master prompt, the system prompt. So it takes it into account in everything that it does. So I've told it it's an expert internal auditor, helping to draft internal audit reports. I've told it to be clear and concise. This is all the information I've given it, you know, and I've told it how it's going to behave. So it knows what it has to do. That's the context. And at this point, we've now gone into a consolidation prompt. So it's returning some data. Don't worry about the technical, but it's returning some findings. Essentially, we've got all those categories, and it's telling me, it's giving us some guidelines on how it should do it. Remember, it knows what it's doing because we've said in the master prompt, the system prompt, that it's going to be an expert internal auditor. See how it's done. There we go. So it's created my 5 findings. And to be fair, this looks reasonably good. Inadequate AI governance framework and oversight, insufficient data management, inadequate fairness and bias management. Seems about right. I like this. This makes sense. Now, parked underneath all of these are the individual audit issues that I've found, the observations that I found. And if I said, for example, I think it's made a mistake and that one shouldn't be in there, I can move it across, or vice versa. Let's move it back. I think that was the right one.
And this is that validation we were talking about before,
yeah,
when we've mapped out the process. So you're using AI you've written your prompts, you're using AI to kind of perform that first step of converting your issues log into your themed findings. But at every stage, you have to go in and check and do that human review
Yeah,
of, someone with that internal audit experience.
yeah, exactly. Now, AI's given me a first draft here. I might not like it. So I might want to change it, right? I might want to edit that finding, make it a little bit better. I might want to rerun the AI, for example. If I'm a reviewer, I might want to add some comments to it, so on and so forth. So as Charlotte said, you can't just blindly allow AI to do this. What you have to do is you have to put the key controls around it, but it can make you that first step. It can take you that first step that's going to make things a lot easier. So let's just pretend everything's all right, and we've gone through the review and everything, and we're ready to create those management actions. So there we go. There's our 5 findings. Let's generate all actions. Now let's go and see what this is doing in the background. So it's consolidating. Well, we've got the management action prompt there. So suggest management actions for the following audit findings. So it's telling me what it wants to create, and it's saying it wants smart, it wants the root cause, not just symptoms, cost effectiveness, practicality, 2 to 4 actions per finding typically. Higher risk findings may need more immediate actions. Well, that all kind of makes sense. Again, that's kind of like my mental IP. If I was writing something, if I was creating an audit report, that's what I'd be thinking when I was creating those management actions myself. So let's see how it's done. It's still going. It must be busy.
I think some of those, we can kind of talk on this a bit later as well, but these things around, for example, you're looking for 2 to 4 findings per 2 to 4 actions per finding. That's the kind of thing that I think, when I'm thinking it through, I don't kind of necessarily think of it in that. I don't spot that pattern in that way, because I'm thinking, well, what are the actions to address the underlying root cause? But I think if you look over your good examples of your audit reports, and you're using those to kind of spot your patterns and define your writing style, more often than not, that is kind of what we're talking about. So sometimes it's quite interesting to challenge yourself to, you might describe what you want it to do one way, and then if you to go back and actually look through what you've written over your best 2 reports, 3 reports over the last year, there might be a few things that you hadn't noticed that actually is going to be really helpful for crafting those prompts to getting you to the answers you're looking for.
Yeah. And I think it's, naturally, given my background as a IT or as a data specialist auditor, I've kind of gravitated naturally towards AI. And you think about it, right? If I was to write an audit report, I'd write it straight out of my head, and then I'd send it to my head of audit for review, or the chief auditor for review, okay? Or I'd get sent it for review by one of my team. You automatically get a stronger report, in my view, in my experience, if you use AI, because there's already 2 of you sparring off each other. And if you use AI in that way to be able to think through, is this the right finding? How else could I look at it? What might the CFO say, for example, so on and so forth? Then you end up with a much stronger report before it goes for review. Right, anyway, so we've done it. It took quite a while, presumably because it was thinking it through. So in an ideal world in this app, I'd agree the actions, etc. So I can turn that tick box green, and then that would go from draft to final. Alternatively, I could edit it like before. Alternatively, I could add review points there. Alternatively, I could bin it altogether. Or alternatively, I could just say, right, you've got the wrong one, and I can add some new ones down there. But let's say it's all fine. Let's proceed to that executive summary. So there we go. We're on the executive summary screen now. Now I want it to suggest a rating, and it's telling me it's unsatisfactory. I click that. Who do I want the report to go to? Well, I want it to go to the audit committee and the executive team. Simple. let's see how it does at generating an executive summary. Now, while it's busy generating that executive summary, let's see what it's running in the background. So again, it's no different to how you would craft a report. You could do a prompt, and you could do a lot of this within something like Copilot yourself. So there's the executive summary prompt that is running in the background right there. All what you're seeing right now is just a shiny front end to run these prompts and make it easy for the user. So again, generate an executive summary, output format, and then the guidelines for how it wants you to do it. So be balanced, that's really important, obviously. And again, that's back down to your mental IP there and your experience in creating those reports. So it's done it. I've got an unsatisfactory report. I've got a bunch of findings. Let me have a look at the report. Here we go. So it's generated a PDF report. There's my executive summary. Here's my detailed findings. Throw my actions in. I'm happy with that. Very simple. I can download the PDF.
It's so good. Can you like imagine if you're writing all of that yourself? You know, that is for an experienced auditor still, you know, a day's work that has taken 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And obviously, as you're going through it, if it's, you know, if this is a real report, you're probably spending a little bit more time on the validation at each of the points, and maybe you're kind of reading, playing back what the IA has written for you and saying, actually, I've got another really good point to go in. Let's kind of refine it that way. But yeah, it's just such a huge time saver.
Now, again, we've shown you that developers who develop AI solutions, they take the prompts that you would run and they put a shiny front end of them and they create an app out of them. And that is what the large banks are doing right now in the internal audit space. And what I've shown you is the direction of travel on automated internal audit reports. But none of this is AI generates a report, a final report, and it's perfect. All of this is assisting the auditor to get it right. All of this, when we think about what the big institutions are doing as well, is it's not press a button and it's done. It's press a button, come up with the first draft, review it, tweak it, then press another button to get you there. Again, with my practice head on, when I wasn't in-house, when I was in practice, you know, there's normally 2 days worth of chargeable time there to a third party to do this. If you can bootstrap that process by making people do this, then that's going to save you cash every month. I'm happy with my report as well. Let's close it. It's locked now. Nobody can touch it, and there's a log there. So if anybody comes along, a regulator, and said, "Well, how did you create that report?" or "You're going through EQA, what was the process?" Every single comment you've made on that report, every single adjustment you've made on that report, every AI step is recorded, so you can see exactly how you got to the final report from the issue log as well. So the future of auditing, in my view, isn't AI is going to do it all. As I hope you can see, the future of auditing is actually it's just going to take away a lot of the grunt work and make it even easier for you to do, and make it a lot more safer in terms of being able to support your conclusions from having the evidence to be able to say, I've done it the right way. I will stop sharing my screen now, Charlotte.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, I think as auditors, the expectation for internal audit has kind of grown, particularly over the last few years, right? So the ask to be closer to the business from more of a kind of advisory perspective as well, giving that real-time view on risk, that kind of forward-looking view on risk to help. You've got the value, of course, in the kind of traditional internal audit, but trying to do a lot with very little is impossible. So where we can use AI, we can kind of take the teams that we've already got. We're not, you still need that human element throughout, but you're freeing up time to focus on that more kind of hands-on business support as well, still maintaining your kind of your objectivity, but you're not spending as much time writing, and redrafting is probably a big bugbear for everybody. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Yeah, perfect. I'm back on. So with that live demo, let's now talk through some of the steps to embed AI. So you've built your prototype, you want to embed it. These are the steps that you want to follow. So you want to anchor your prompts to your methodology. Everybody's got different reporting styles, as we keep saying, but more than that, you know, your methodology is so much more. So as you're refining your model, you want to make sure that it has got that anchor point, that alignment to your own internal audit methodology. You want to be prepared to keep refining your prompts until they're getting you the output that's really high level. We said earlier, it's all about investing time up front, spend time on the build and on that fine tuning now, so that down the line, you're saving a lot of time on redrafting outputs. There's no point putting a lot of work in to get to kind of building a tool and then having prompts that get you like a half decent report, and then you still need to do a lot of rework. Keep going and think about it from a kind of continuous improvement perspective as well. We also spoke before about few-shot prompting. So that's where you feed in some examples of the finished product, some of your best reports to train your AI on the desired output that it's aiming for. And that can really help improve the quality, you know, the look and feel of the output as well. And for more investment, you can build a database that's got all of your audit work papers, your issues logs, your reports, so that it's got much more information to work from. And when you're doing that, you've then got the possibility to go kind of much further in terms of what you can ask the AI to do as well. Ideally, once you reach your desired output, you're going to codify the prompts, and that's what's going on in the back end of the app that we've just shown you. So this might be a step that you need some outside help with. It depends if you've got the skills there in your team, but you're getting all the way to your kind of working prototype in using, you know, kind of simple English and process mapping. And at that point, that's where if you do codify, that just helps you with consistency and the kind of reliance that you can place on the output that you're getting. And finally, I think just don't forget the rollout controls. It's all well and good building something, but make sure that you, when you get to those kind of final steps 5, step 6, you are locking down edit access so that you do have that confidence over what's going on in the back end. So lock down edit access to the logic and train your team on how to use it and when to use it so that everyone's getting the most out of it. Anything else there, Jamie, on embedding AI?
No, I think that's quite comprehensive. I mean, the one question I always get asked is, AI is not secure. How do I don't want to send my data to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever else, and it's totally understandable. I'm guessing everybody on this call or listening to this call will have signed an enterprise agreement with Microsoft. And what people don't realize is that Microsoft, because they gave a big chunk of money to OpenAI when they were getting started, have private access to all the OpenAI models. So they basically pinky promise that they won't use your data for any other reason, and most clients have taken it to mean that you can use the OpenAI models through the Azure platform, and your data doesn't leave the boundaries of what you've already risk accepted through your Microsoft agreement. So it's not right when clients say to me, well, I can't do, I'm stuck with Copilot because that's all I can do. That's not true. You have access to all of ChatGPT's models privately on your tenant. You've just got to go and ask your IT administrator to get happy with it and provision it for you.
I think that's a really good point. We're going to move on to Q&A now, but maybe I'll kind of kick us off with a question for you, Jamie. So what do you see as the biggest challenge for internal audit when adopting and embedding AI?
Culture and change. So you can, all of this, if you've got somebody who is technical, isn't as hard as it probably appears. You know, that app that you've just seen that I've built in a few weeks, it's not hard. What is hard though is getting people to getting the vision to want something like that, getting your team to use it, getting the IT teams that you work in behind it. That's the hard bit. The tech isn't the hard bit at all. It really isn't. It's the cultural change that's needed, and I think to do that, people need to really understand the risk behind this, and what the risks with AI are, what the key controls that mitigate that risk. Yeah, hallucinations are a risk, massive risk. But if you give it the information to find the truth from, and you're checking it every step of the way, then that mitigates the hallucination risk, doesn't it? So you've just got to really take a measured, independent look at the real risks that affect you, and make sure that you're comfortable with it before moving forward, instead of just being scared or saying I can't do it or whatever else. I think that's it for me, Charlotte.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really solid answer. So some of the questions that are coming through, and if you've got any more questions, everyone please just log them in Teams, because we've got a little bit of time to go through some of them now. So one question that we've got, Jamie, I often find when writing a report, the majority of time is spent not on making sure the issues are included, but on tying them together in a convincing, nuanced way that captures the business context. When I work with AI, they can produce convincing drafts, but miss that essential nuance. It's the difference between a first draft landing well with a business or not. So do you have any tips on how to get more of the value add into AI draft reports?
It's very true, and it's a very common problem. So when you submit a prompt to AI, it goes into something called its context window, and its context window, it can be quite huge. You can have millions of characters in there, which means the more you stuff it, the more information you give it, the more it can use to give you that draft, that right answer. Now, ways round it, what are the ways you can get around this to get that nuanced information about your organization? Well, you can point it at meeting minutes, recordings. You can point at it where you've got your notes, so on and so forth. So it takes all of that into account, as long as it fits in your context window. You can, of course, just improve your prompt. You can say, when you're generating this report, think about this. The CFO's really budget conscious. You can draft it all out, and there's nothing wrong with you sitting there before you draft your prompt and go, actually, what are the key factors in my mind that when I draft this report, I'm going to take into account, and then make sure AI knows it. So you've got a couple of ways that you can do that. You can stuff your prompts with all that information out of your head, or if you've got access to developers, you can build some sort of system like we've just demonstrated that goes out to various different information repositories to draw on that information as necessary. The key thing, though, isn't giving the AI that information, it's making sure it uses it in the way that you want to do. And we go back to the context clarity constraint there. If you wanted to use that information to create a good report, you've got to have a good prompt behind it, whether that's in an application like I've shown you, or whether that's in Copilot.
I see one of the challenges as well, kind of in this field, being your issues log sometimes is quite minute issues that, you know, kind of individual control weaknesses, control breakdowns, and stepping back and saying, well, actually, if we've got a bunch of these kind of similar granular issues going on, what's the story that's going on overall? Like, why are all these small things happening? And obviously part of that is your identification of the root cause and grouping your findings by root cause. But I think this is a challenge sometimes that holds true when you're writing reports and when you're using AI, which is to just kind of take a step back and saying, well, what are we seeing here that we haven't already said? And so kind of going back to what you're saying there, Jamie, a lot of this is kind of feeding it in, doing the work, looking at the issues that you've got and the overall kind of takeaway that you've got from running the audit before you're even using AI to say, well, this is what I'm thinking, and plugging all of that information in, your kind of brain dump of everything that's going on. Another question we've got, how should we measure and evidence return on investment on AI, particularly where benefits are indirect, such as efficiency, quality, risk reduction, etc.? And I'll maybe start us off here by saying, I think I understand the question, but I think that efficiency isn't a particularly indirect return on investment. You can measure efficiency quite easily. You can measure how much time you've spent on reporting, for example, over the last 12 months, or you can measure how much time you spent on doing quality assurance file checks, for example, if we're thinking about those two use cases. And that gives you that really kind of tangible amount of time. You can measure the length of your report writing process as well. How long is it taking from closeout meeting to getting that first draft to stakeholders, and how many rewrites or redrafts is the report going through before it gets out to that, before it is in a position to be shared with management. And all of that's giving you data to tell you what your ROI is when you're using AI, because that time saved is obviously time used elsewhere. Jamie, is there anything else?
One of the issues that I found working with big functions is the perennial issue of how do I make sure a red report reads like a red report, and we don't just offer a red report and we appease people by putting green wording in it, for example, or vice versa, right? If you use a structured process, it takes all of that away. So there's the quality of your audit reporting, which using AI in a structured way really does solve. I think as well, again, in cover your ears, Charlotte, as both of us are external providers to the internal audit industry, you're often told, right, you have, in the budget it's 2 days to write the report. Well, actually, you know what? This probably only takes one now, so there's a direct cash saving there. So it's not just about the time it takes to write a report. Sometimes it's about how much it's costing you to write a report and the quality of that report and the rewrites and all the rest of it. If you're using a third party, it's going to cost you to do. So you can measure it that way as well. My co-source budget has gone down by X.
Yeah. And look, this is the way the market's moving, I think, and this is kind of the way business is moving. Probably one other thing that, and this is not so much return on investment, unless you're thinking about it in terms of redrafting time, but sometimes when you use co-source partners to deliver your internal audit, you get a report that clearly reads like it's been written by someone else. But if you've got an AI tool, if you've got like an AI model that you're using to write your reports, you're not only kind of saving time on that process, but you're getting that kind of consistent voice.
Yep.
So that's kind of another benefit that you can get there.
That's a really, really good and fair point, especially when you've got big firms and big teams. Chief auditor is not going to review every single report. And that consistent review and that consistent outcomes is really important. And that's where AI can really help, because the head of audit for one division of a bank might produce very different sounding reports to the head of audit for another division of the same bank.
With no more questions in the chat, but I might kind of pose a question to you, Jamie. So where do you see agents like this going wrong?
Where do I see them going wrong? I see them going wrong where people blindly rely on them without reviewing the output. And it goes back to that, the technical term, the literal technical term for this is human in the loop, but it's also common sense, right? People think of AI as we said in the last webinar, they think of it as a deterministic output. They think of it like it's a computer, therefore it must be right. We all know that when we do controls testing on automated processes, we take a smaller sample, right? With AI, you should not do that. It is probabilistic, and therefore everything it produces should be reviewed. Doesn't mean that it's not going to save you time. Doesn't mean that it's not great. Doesn't mean that it's not. Doesn't negate any of those things. But it's not a case of, computer says yes. It's a case of let's use it as a first draft. And again, that analogy of it's a junior member of staff and it's bright and it's brilliant, but you can't trust anything that comes out of it till you reviewed it. That stands.
I think the other thing I would add is not being clear on what you're aiming for. So I think, teams can spend a bunch of time investing into building something, and there can be a temptation when you're building something new to kind of use that at the same time to kind of revamp maybe what your audit reports look like. And trying to do two things at the same time, then that kind of template that you're working towards, or that example you're working towards, might not actually land in the same way you want it to. So I think spending the time up front, working out what your existing report writing style is, and then using AI to mimic that style is perhaps kind of a more successful approach, unless if you're at the same time revamping your report writing to really spend time kind of as a team workshopping and deciding what that exact writing style is you want it to end up with. Because what you don't want to do is put in all this time and effort to get to an output, and actually it turns out people in the team don't necessarily agree on what the output is, or the person that's been driving this has got one vision and the chief audit officer has got another vision of what reports should be, and then you were kind of back to scratch on your prompts. One other question we've got in the chat, Rosemary asking for a link to the recording for part one. We will send out a link to that recording with the slides, don't worry about that. And we've actually got a QR code on the next page. So maybe I'll just go to the next slide. What's next? So, as we mentioned, this is part of our series of AI webinars for internal audit. With this QR code, you can register for the next session, and also in that page, you get a link to the previous webinar for anybody that didn't attend and would like to watch it. So as we mentioned, the third webinar is going to look at how to audit AI. So a little bit of a different spin to the first two, but we really want to give you that kind of practical how-to guide, because as much as we want to be upskilling ourselves, and it's important to be upskilled on AI to kind of know what we're dealing with to get the benefits from it, but also to have that knowledge to be able to audit it. I think, there's a few more complexities to auditing it. And so if you join us back in March, we'll be able to take you through that. We will send around a feedback survey as well, and we'd love your feedback as well as any suggestions for any topics you'd like us to cover in future sessions. I'll just leave that up on screen for a minute. And look, thank you everybody for joining us today. What we really hope we've been able to do is demystify some of what it takes to build an AI model, helped you kind of look through that process so that maybe you can get started on building your own report writing models. And it's something that we're working together. So Bloch AI and DCR, we're partnering together to help clients build this themselves, and developing the app that Jamie has shown on screen as well. So we're around, and please reach out if you would like to have a chat about how we can help you do that, or if you've just got any questions about it in general. But thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.